Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to the next Google Hangout on Air for the Barbara Bush Foundation Adult Literacy XPRIZE. We're very excited to continue on with our webinar series here. We've had several recently, so I will make sure that I send out the links to those recorded sessions. And then we also have several more coming up in the upcoming week. So next week, we actually have one on Tuesday and on Thursday. So again, I will be putting out information for those, so we hope you will join us then as well. But today, we have David from Whiteboard Advisors. We're going to be talking about the adult education market on the financing side. So we're very excited to have him. If you do have any questions, just refer to the right side of your screen. You can submit a question there. That will come into us, and then when appropriate, I will hand those over to David during the presentation, or maybe at the end of the presentation. So David, without any more filler, I'm just going to turn it over to you, and thanks again for joining us.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Well, in today's presentation, I think we're going to tackle what's a little bit of a tricky issue, both the huge amount of opportunity in adult literacy and providing technology solutions to this market. And you'll see there are some challenges. It's not an easy thing to do. If this were simple and if there were a clear path forward, then it probably would have already been done. So good news for us is that it hasn't been done at scale, and there's a huge opportunity. And it's one of these issues, you know, when I talk about it, you think about it, like what's the obvious item 10 years from now that you look back and you say, of course we should have done this. Of course this exists. And providing technology solutions for adult literacy, for adult training, career pathways I think is really going to be one of those. So I'm excited to provide a quick overview on where we stand today and where the opportunity rests, and ways to really begin to think about the question. So we put together a paper with Digital Promise entitled Accelerating Change, How Education Technology Developers Can Jumpstart a New Adult Education Market. And our experience bring to this field is years of dealing in complex regulatory issues, combining that with market growth and penetration in K-12 and the workforce issues in higher education, and trying to kind of steer and navigate changes, innovative thinking into these sectors. And so we're really fortunate to partner with Digital Promise to really bring the intersection of policy, markets, and thought leadership together to this issue. So we're excited on that partnership, and I think it's really going to bear some fruit down the line, particularly with the Barbara Bush XPRIZE prize, and as that grows and as that influences others over time. A little bit about me. My name is David Shriver, co-director at Whiteboard Advisor, and I've been doing education and regulatory work, particularly around workforce issues in higher ed and K-12, for about 20 years now. Far too long than I should have probably been doing it, but now I have so many scars on the issues that I can't seem to get away from it. But sometimes that experience can be beneficial. So let's talk about what we want to cover today. Really about 4 items: a quick summary of the opportunity that we see before us, an examination and a brief overview of the limitations of today's government programs, in particular the federal side, and that connects into some of the state programs, and fleshing out some of the new opportunities and ways to think about some of the new opportunities when it comes to accessing finance and building upon the changes from the policy perspective, the changes that are just beginning to take root. So in short, like how do we think about this issue? I think we recognize that there is a big shift occurring, and that it's a promising time for the market here. The policies are shifting in federal and state. There's a lot of leadership going back to state and local levels on workforce training, on adult education, and there's a slew of great technology that's out there. There's K-12, post-secondary, EdTech, a lot of stuff that's really beginning to change the way we learn, the way we use our mobile devices, and the way we provide instruction to students. And that's going to carry over to adult learning. So it's really going to be a question of not developing something new, but properly equipping and utilizing what we're doing well already. And it'll be interesting to track that. And so let's take a look at kind of how we begin to do that. And I think I tend to enjoy a story about cartography, and I stole this and borrowed it from Josh Green. He's a author of a book called Fault in Our Stars. He's an alumni. We went to the same college, Kenyon College, and he tells a story about casting your way forward, and he uses the cartography analogy. And that Agloe, New York, is a famous place for cartographers because it doesn't exist. And so when you're developing maps, you're creating maps, the way that you would protect your map and protect it in copyright is that you would make up places. And two map makers in 1937 created a place called Agloe, New York, as a way to identify it as their maps. And later down the line, decades later, Rand McNally produced their own map, and it had Agloe, New York on it. So they're like, oh, we got this guy now. So they went to the map makers and they just said, no, this place this is our map. And the response was, no, this actually exists now. Because you created this, people began to emerge at this intersection, and it became a real place. There was a gas station, a post office arrived, Rockland, Agloe became a real place. And I think this is very similar to the way we should approach adult literacy in the EdTech sector. Is if we begin to clearly kind of lay out the vision, draw attention to it, identify the opportunities, like this thing will happen. And it's an inspiration that I think we can take from cartography. So Agloe, New York, and it'll be a reference that I will make throughout the presentation. So let's think about this opportunity, because it's so big and it's so obvious that maybe it's too big that people miss it. But if we look at the potential market of low-skilled adults just in the United States, we're dealing with 36 million low-skilled adults. Today, we only serve around 4.1 million of those adults through literacy or some combination of literacy in the workforce training program. But that's a paltry amount that are being currently served and benefiting from the $10 billion that we invest each year in adult learning services across multiple programs. And then let's break that down a bit further. Like, what about the technology investment for those 4.1 million? So there's only about 200 million in digital materials for adult learners. And we compare this to the 8 billion in K-12 education. It completely pales in comparison, and it lays bare the need and the opportunity for this market. So one of these things that it's so big that it's how do we begin to tackle it? Well, why haven't we tackled it? Why is it weak to this point? Part of it is the federal delivery system. The key federal program that has influenced state and local investments is the Workforce Investment Act. Recently changed the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. They added innovation purposefully because there's a big change before us. And this is effectively comprised of two titles. Title I, the Adult Workforce Development Program, that's kind of the big chunk of it, which is workforce training. And Title II, the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act, AEFLA. This is the literacy, kind of low-skilled reading programs, get you up to speed so you can get your degree and then get on a career pathway. But that only comes in at about 600 million per year annually from Department of Education that works with Department of Labor to implement these programs. It's a very small amount, but even with that amount, what do we know about the delivery? And it makes it has been very difficult to sell into these programs because it is a fractured delivery system. So if we look at AEFLA, the primary federal funding vehicle that connects with state and local services, the way the funds flow is that it goes to a state administering agency, but they don't make procurement decisions. Rather, they provide subgrants, smaller subgrants, to a wide range of providers like nonprofits, libraries, community colleges. Effectively, you have, as you see on this graph here, a very fractured service delivery system. So there's not a clear place, not a clear buyer for technology at scale. And this makes it difficult to get out of just the mom and pop delivery systems, the mom and pop solutions, because they tend to be associated or have a connection with a local library or a small nonprofit doing great work in the community, but difficult to scale and don't have the resources to really create a broader application or a broader solution. And the state agency isn't in the position to tell the delivery entities what to do or what to buy or how to do it. It's always been just a very fractured system. Now, this too is the case when we carry over to the workforce training program. And there's this overlap between literacy training and workforce training because obviously they're connected. The program has in the past bifurcated it, but recent changes allow them to intermingle where you can do a literacy program and get workforce training as well, so you can get on a career pathway. But what we've seen with the $1.7 billion that is distributed to the federal government and is then connected with state and local activities is that it goes out towards state agencies that have a workforce investment board that oversee one-stops. And these are locations where individuals who need job training or literacy services go. They get screening based on their needs, and then they will get a voucher, a training account to use on a variety of state-approved programs. Now, this consumer choice, this voucher amongst fractured one-stop centers, again, makes it difficult to sell into. And it makes it difficult to achieve a degree of scale requirement that's required for investment, research, development, and to really have a foundation for a lively adult education technology market. So these are culprits that have historically, I think, mitigated the effectiveness of the federal dollars. And likewise, states have been fractured as well. I think they're as culpable as the federal government. I did the paper, the Accelerating Change paper, which I think you have access to, but I talked about Virginia, and they do an audit of their programs, and they found that there was 23 different agencies delivering multiple types of programs, and it was just all over the place. And there's now a recognition, and this is where we begin to make the turn, where we see these new opportunities. There's now a recognition that there has to be a redesign of the way we deliver and the way we coordinate these programs. And for us on the market side, this means that there will be new procurement agencies, more centralized opportunities to sell into adult training and adult workforce programs. And that's going to, I think, in time, create a lot more opportunity. At the federal level, what do we need to know about the changes before us? Well, typically, the workforce governing boards worked really to just flow through entities to regional investment boards that just flowed the money down to, again, fractured one-stop centers. But now there's a requirement to create a robust state planning document, a unified plan that is designed to integrate the needs of the private sectors, economic need, the provider needs, employee needs, and to provide better systems of delivery across education, workforce, community college sectors, across multiple sectors, in the development of pathways. Now, this is a very important term, career pathways. And it's the buzz term du jour, right? So if you're entering now the workforce program, they want to get you on a career pathway that allows for stackable credentials that will make you attractive to an industry or an economic regional need. Likewise, we can go downstream on this need. There are literacy pathways. So if you're in Illinois working with the state workforce boards, they try not to distinguish between a career pathway and a literacy/degree pathway. These things are interconnected, and they're trying to coordinate at the state level the opportunities for these plans. And again, for us, the implication is that we're moving away from an historically fractured delivery system into one that is attempting to be more coordinated. Now, I say attempting because we're not going to have these plans until July of this year. Then that's when the first version of these new state plans are due as required by the Federal Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And that's what the, quote, innovation stands for, kind of a redesign of the process. And states are taking advantage of this. In this slide here, I talk about the Ohio Adult Diploma Program, ADP. It's an example of workforce agencies and education agencies working together, removing regulation, and providing real access to, from the market side, real access to adult learners, a real competency-based programs. So individuals can go to a community college, get literacy programs, get their high school degree, and at the same time get workforce training skills. It's a much more efficient system that has been created by the Ohio Department of Education through state legislation to coordinate multiple agencies in the delivery of programs. So now we have more of a centralized pool of money that the state has created. Likewise, California is now trying to reorganize their regional delivery systems to consolidate procurement opportunities, to consolidate program opportunities, so that there is more leverage to access and more leverage to sell into a higher entity. It doesn't have to be as fractured as it's been. So it's very important to watch what happens with these unified plans. It's very important to watch what happens, how states will begin to create policies that feed into this unified federal plan. But it's also, keep in mind that municipalities, out of frustration in part, in the past have gone their own way, such as the Philadelphia's Commission on Literacy. And this is a program that effectively got frustrated at the fractured literacy registration programs that are out there and simply unified that. And in so doing, they created the database, a one-stop center for the provision of registration and the delivery of services on a platform through the city. Again, here's technology serving an opportunity presented by a relatively fractured delivery system. And philanthropies are tackling this as well. Obviously, we're here talking about the Barbara Bush Adult Literacy XPRIZE. Digital Promise is very busy on this. Joyce Foundation. There's a recognition of the importance of the role of adult learners in the marketplace, the opportunity to accelerate economic development by utilizing these adults, and it ties into significant changes that are just beginning to occur. And then again, those are in large part driven by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act that's requiring states to rethink their delivery system and how they flow funds to programs. So there will be in the coming years, beginning in particular in 2017 when we look at the state plans, but there will be new opportunities to access larger pools of funds and to sell into something that's a little more tangible than we've had in the past. But that's only part of it, right? So let's move on to the next slide. And one of the challenges that we saw in drafting the Accelerating Change document is to figure out that we can't just lay this all on the feet of the Workforce Investment Act or fractured state workforce training and literacy programs, traditional underfunding. Like that's far too easy. We also have a design problem, and there really is an opportunity to rethink what we know works in other sectors and apply that to known demands and known needs of adult learners. And so when we sat down and thought about how do we access a market that we know is changing, we know there will be more fluidity because of the policy changes, there clearly needs to be some pressure on the developer side to take some of the best practices in higher education in K-12 and to think about ways that we apply that to the adult learner. And so what this graph represents is kind of 4 principles that we laid out on the paper, that adult learners face multiple obstacles and barriers to learning. You know, there's considerable life challenges that they have to address. That's not the case for the usual K-12 student. They learn differently than the traditional students. Their time allocation is different. Their capacity to go to locations are different. Their capacity to network with their peers are different. That's because jobs, children, sickness, health, you name it. You know, you can imagine situations. But we also know that they thrive in a mentorship, in a mentor-rich environment, and that adult learners are, for the most part, insanely motivated. So if we can tap into this by taking the best of competency-based education programs, utilizing what we know from accelerated learning micro-credential programs like boot camps, capitalizing on digital badges, stackable credentials, and delivering personalized learning. And that means in-face. That means utilizing mentors. That means a variety of delivery that accommodates their learning. All of these solutions that we identify in the paper that have traction in the K-12 and higher education sector can certainly apply to these principles that are specific to the adult learners. And so it's not sufficient to simply just package a program that was designed for K-12 or something else and provide that, just flip that over for the adult learner. Rather, there needs to be a specific delivery, a specific approach to adult learning. And what's interesting about this, let me go back to one slide. The Ohio Adult Diploma Program, as a requirement of receiving a state grant to carry out these programs, there has to be a articulation of how the learning model is specific to the needs of adults in their regions and connected to both the economic and the community needs. So here's a program that has been very useful as an illustration point because it provides the opportunity for technology to deliver competency-based education, micro-credentials, personalized learning environments, the use of mobile technology to a specific state problem that connects with existing funds at the federal and state level. So, pardon me. So the program is really unique in that it does exactly this. It asks for a vehicle delivery technologies and programs specifically for the adult learners. And we also then ask about smart partnerships, because even if we design programs that are specific to the adult learners and we make the most of existing federal and state funding streams, a redesign of those programs to eliminate or reduce the fracturing to provide more of elevated procurement opportunities, there needs to be some interesting conversations that are outside of the traditional methods. And so we've identified 3 items that we need to, I think, actively think about and have discussions, which is, given the regulatory changes at the federal and state level, how do we map career pathways? Here is an opportunity for technology to provide a solution that we currently don't have. An example is California. There are so many workforce boards. They're trying to consolidate this. They're trying to share information. They're trying to be more systemic and streamlined on the coordination, registration, delivery, deployment, all of which is a wonderful technology problem. Like the Philadelphia scenario, the literacy initiative, it began as a function of streamlining registration, and then so doing, streamlining a diverse and a kind of a diverse set of practices. It then provided a way to deliver literacy programs and literacy resources as well. So as states develop the unified plan, there will be this opportunity to ask questions about what does the mapping look like? How do we consolidate resources and how do we enable better interagency cooperation? These are specific problems that can be solved, and that will help us access and kind of utilize and increase that market opportunity. Cross-sector collaboration. I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunities and issues that we need to flesh out and have more robust conversations around. Because there's a lot of technology in K-12, what about the parents? How are we connecting what the students are doing to the needs of parents? How do we do multi-generational, kind of two-generational solutions that allow parental access to learning platforms, to learning solutions that could work with what their kids are doing? And that's a real opportunity that can be interagency and across the community. Two issues which are in great need, and also extending the reach of higher education. And more of this is documented in the paper. But the kind of the punchline here is that community colleges, innovative institutions are really interested in competency-based learning, providing upskilling opportunities for individuals. But it's hard to identify who those individuals would be. How do you create lead generation applications that can find motivated adults that could be connected to an institution of higher education that is doing competency-based learning? The institution would obviously be interested in finding something that saves them money and provides them adults that are motivated and have proven a demonstrated capacity to learn on such an education platform, for example. And it could also provide a great benefit for those adult learners who are trying to access a variety of new technology. So is there opportunities in connecting with institutions of higher educations to help support and fund programs that would serve a broader cohort of adults? And then obviously outreach, direct-to-consumer outreach in corporations. So how do we think about deeper segmentation of the market? There's so many different kind of adult learners out there. So can one adult learner provide a peer scholarship to support another adult learner? Can one sector support the other? Are there kind of ways to structure pricings and incentives that could relieve the cost for the most in need, provided by those who are maybe an early adopters and more of a middle income and upskill opportunities? So I think there's some interesting ways to think about market segmentation and direct to consumer opportunities. Interesting ways to think about, kind of on to the next bullet, attracting telecom providers. Obviously mobile is going to be king on this. And so what is the benefit for telecom to providing a consumer social responsibility tool out in the marketplace? Can they help to subsidize if the federal and state funds are insufficient, which I think they are? And also corporate social responsibility in recruiting. Like, how is this a function of HR? How can it be a function of commercial development? I think some real items, real important opportunities to find new sources of revenue that can enhance and can match what the state and the federal government has been trying to do for years, and ways to get more creative about the way we approach the market. So it's not simply relying on the federal and state funding programs as they exist today, but helping to reimagine what programs can look like. And so all of this is contained in the paper. So the thrust of the paper is, again, like, how do we then, knowing things need to change and knowing that we need to create an algo for us, how do we create our algo in New York, recognizing that there are components that are already there? There are changes to the policy at the federal and state levels that will create this opportunity. But how do we accelerate those opportunities with design principles and with collaborative partnerships within the regulatory changes that we see across the sectors, and thinking about direct-to-consumer and corporation opportunities? So I think all of these pieces need to work together if we're going to identify and better fund what is likely an inevitable market and likely a very lucrative market. Again, we're so underserving this population, and the gap between those who have and those who have not, and those who are accelerating. I mean, that's the theme of the presidential election, right? It's the theme of most of the kind of literacy and literature that you read about adult learning and economic strife within our communities. Like, gets to the core of it. So we need to kind of think creatively about it, recognize where current limitations are on federal and state programs. How do we then patch together both design principles and partnership conversations that can help supplement the changes that are soon to be occurring in the current delivery funding opportunities. So that is the quick overview of the paper. I think you were able to download it as well. It's called Accelerating Change: How Education Technology Developers Can Jumpstart the New Adult Education Market. The purpose of the paper, again, was to really identify where we are and the funding limitations and the funding opportunities, and then to begin to triangulate the components and the pieces that we need to help really create this new market. And over the next coming years and time, I think it will be an exciting opportunity to begin to chart and map our new course going forward. So with that, I will go back to the Google Hangout and hopefully address some questions.
That's wonderful, David. Thank you. If you want to, if you're gonna, okay. So now I can see you. Great, wonderful overview. Really love the story about Agloe, New York. I think that's great. That's one that I will remember and share around. So we don't have any questions right now, but I have a question for you actually. So the Adult Literacy XPRIZE, we are kind of trying to build a community around a very specific problem. So very early literacy for adult learners.
Right.
But we have, lots of contacts. We have a great partner in the Barbara Bush Foundation and Dollar General Literacy Foundation. And so we're building this community of solvers that are working in this space, and hopefully will continue to work in this space regardless of how their entries turn out. And just wondering what you think the XPRIZE as a whole can do to kind of, help spur some of those conversations that you were mentioning, help support some of the changes that are coming into place. Is there anything that you feel that we as a community, so both XPRIZE and all of our competitors, can kind of team up together on to push anything forward?
Well, I think the one item that jumps out at me is that a solution need not be expensive. So if we are tied into a broader economic issue, so I'm actually staring out the window right now at a slew of economic development in Washington, D.C. So a lot of commercial real estate development occurring. And when you go to your urban centers, there's a lot of question about kind of shifting economies, gentrification. I think it's important for us to recognize that the value we can generate to provide services to low literacy communities that are on the wrong end of an economic question is significant. And if we partner with a commercial real estate development corporation that recognize this could be the match to a state and federal program, that has legs, and that I think can create some innovative and fresh perspectives on a long-standing problem. And technology, we have the technology to deliver this, to do this type of work. The challenge may be in how we frame this technology relative to the economic opportunity and the demand that's out there. If we're able to do that in a succinct and powerful way, that's unique to a particular region or a particular city, then you have a powerful entry point. And so, recognizing that there needs to be this, we need to take a step back and figure out how do we frame it and how do we place it, so that it is not simply existing in a silo, but part of a broader process of systemic change that can help support one of the most important populations in this country, and particularly in our cities and in our rural areas. So being strategic about that is essential, and recognizing that addresses some of the funding issues, that connects to the creativity that state and local policymakers are thinking through, but they may not have approached it from that particular angle.
Right.
And so there are a lot of opportunities to get footing, to find enough money to be a contributing match to an existing program, and to think through the partnerships that would provide those opportunities.
Yeah, those are good conversations that we will continue to think through. We do have a couple questions that have come in, so I'd love to be able to send those to you. So the first one is, can you talk a bit more about the idea of learners supporting each other, especially perhaps the ideas of connecting parents to kids for the purposes of learning?
Yeah, this is so the question of parents to kids is a very interesting one. And I start this train of thought kind of deeply rooted in K-12, where technology that we've talked about for a long time, the personalized learning platforms and delivery, is just beginning to take root. At the same time, there's a recognition when it comes to low-income communities, which of now, 51% of our students come from low-income communities. They're in your first and second generation parents, they're getting them involved is absolutely critical for the success of the students. So this notion now of a two-generation solution is attractive to the schools. So if they're making this big investment in K-12, is there an add-on or a bolt-on service that can engage the parent in their own literacy pathway and get them involved in their students' education, where suddenly you get the family involved? And we know, like it's at the end of the day, it's about the people. It's about family supports. Connecting these two issues could be really powerful. And again, if we think about how do we access more revenue, more funding opportunities, well, institutions or higher K-12 and institutional higher education want some type of insurance on their investment. And one way to frame it would be that if we can get involved in the parent, if we can involve parents at a very low price point, this is almost taking insurance out that you will succeed with your other investments in K-12. So they're connected. They're very well connected, and so it's bringing these dialogues together in a way that recognizing that this is both a smart investment and it addresses exactly our specific need, but it fits in the ecosystem of a broader story.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. So that's I think a lot of our teams are interested in that because some of our teams are actually competing in both the Global Learning XPRIZE and the Adult Literacy XPRIZE. So the Global Learning XPRIZE is focused on children, on early learning for children, and of course the Adult Literacy XPRIZE is focusing on adults. So it's I think there's definitely some natural connections there.
Right, right. And just reading to your children is one of the key distinguishers between the successful academic career and those students who struggle. But obviously, it's the adults are also practice and exercising, exposing themselves to the resources they may need. So if you can make them aware that by doing this, they're also improving themselves. If you can multi-purpose this somehow, you not only open up your investment opportunities, but you solve larger problems.
Right. Yeah, if you got time, we have one more question from Shell Wooding, so I'd love to make this the last one. So any thoughts on what the best way to reach these adult learners is? So developing a solution is one thing, but getting it to the people who want it or really need it can be another thing altogether. And I think this is in the context of a lot of our teams, I hope, will be taking their products to market regardless of how it ends up going through the Adult Literacy XPRIZE. So I think a lot of people are interested in doing the most good for with their products. So I'd love to hear from you on that.
Yeah, that's a tricky question. So our historical experience, we know that there are some limited avenues in the traditional adult literacy programs that are very parochial and very regional. Hard to do, hard to tap into that. I think that one, we need to be engaged in with discussions at the state level and at the regional level with the policymakers. These may not be the individuals or the entities that ultimately deploy a technology, but they will be the one that will share that information and make sure that there is an awareness across. If it remains for a period of time, if it remains a fractured delivery system, the connection with the policymakers that shape the framework for that will be essential. And I think tangential with that, we have to recognize that this can't be this. We have to think creatively about our partnerships, which led to the section on our accelerating change paper, to think about how do we add value to activities and programs that are on the fast track. The learning accelerator example comes up in the paper. So you have organizations like General Assembly that are growing like bonkers because they're providing technology boot camps and and startup boot camps for fairly well-off individuals. Like, what is our play in connecting, adding value to a General Assembly or a Flatiron, so they can identify a broader set of students? But in the subsidizing this kind of fishing operation for a broader set of students, we're deploying technology resources into our community centers, through, say, the mayor's office, through the economic development workforce program of Seattle, for example. So there are ways, I think, to deploy relatively low-cost technology solutions that could be subsidized in part by a fast-growing organization, because it could benefit them.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking strategically about that connection to fast-moving and fast-growing industries that adds value to their operation, but also then serves our mission.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to think about it. Thank you. Again, this was a wonderful presentation. I can't wait to send out the link to everybody who couldn't attend, and I will also be sure to include the Accelerating Change paper. I know that's already available, but I want to make sure that we highlight for everybody. Thank you again for taking the time. This has been really great. I know if anybody sends in questions later on, maybe I'll have the opportunity to email you, and we can stay in touch. But we really appreciate you taking the time and helping all our teams.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. Good luck on the competition. I am certain this is going to be meaningful, and it's going to lead to some great things. So, whatever we can do to help out, give us a holler, and we'd love to make sure that we get this put on the map.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Take care.